Hey girl.
How's it going?
Good, how are you? Hey guys, this is my good friend Eve, and her son Will has Norrie disease, and I'm gonna let her take it from here. Was that okay? Okay.
Alright guys, so my name's Eve. I live in Columbus, Ohio. My baby boy is 11 months. His birthday is next month, and we're so excited. But he was diagnosed with Norrie disease around 3 or 4 months of age. He was diagnosed with sight issues at 6 weeks. He like 4 to 6 weeks of age. Living it day to day for a while here.
You just nailed that because I have a list of questions that I was like, okay, and you just flew through so many. Okay, did you have a normal pregnancy or did you have any idea of what was to come for you guys?
I had an incredibly normal pregnancy. It was so normal. And the reason I say it was incredibly normal, my sister was pregnant at the same time, and she has factor V Leiden, a bleeding disorder. So she had to get shots in the abdomen twice a day, and she was seeing the high risk doctor every week for the last 3 months of her pregnancy. She would go every week. Thank goodness I don't have to go through that. Thank goodness,
Yeah.
It was so normal. Every time we went in, he was hitting the length milestones, the head milestones. He was just beautiful in there. He was active. I just thought it was gonna go smooth sailing. I mean, it was a fairly unremarkable pregnancy after a C-section and all that.
Yeah.
Everything was normal.
So after he was born, everything seemed completely normal and fine for you guys?
Everything seemed normal and fine. Everything was screwy with COVID. They took the baby out to the nursery, did the newborn check, brought it back, and then they called you on the phone and talked about it over the phone. He had a little red hemorrhage in the white of one of his eyes. So they took him out the first day, and I asked them to take a look at that specifically. He comes back, she called me, she'd tell me, oh yeah, he's fine. And I said, what about the red bloody spot in his eye? Oh, we didn't check it. I'm sure it's normal birthing process. It's easy that happen. I was like, okay, well, I wanted you to just check it. But we were going to be there another day. So I was like, oh, I'll have him check it tomorrow. The next day comes, he leaves the room, he comes back, I get a call. What about his eye? Did you check his eye? And she goes, well, when we're doing our exam, the newborns are typically crying, so we don't check their eye. I remember being dumbfounded. What do you mean you don't check their eyes? It actually ended up being no big deal. It was a hemorrhage from just the birthing process. But I go back to that moment and think to myself, if they had said, let's do an ophthalmology exam just to be sure, would they have caught it? I just have a lot of frustration with that entire experience, that my concerns weren't validated, they weren't looked into. And it just got me thinking, they did a hearing screening. I have 3 pages of a hearing screening, and I got 1 sentence on his eyes, and they verbally told me they didn't even look at him. I would love to do some kind of campaign to advocate for newborn ophthalmology exams, but finding the time.
What if they could have caught it sooner? What if you could have been put on the right track from the get-go instead of being told cerebral palsy?
I'm at peace with it because I think even if we caught it day one, knowing his diagnosis and his disease,
right,
I don't think it would have changed much. So I'm at peace with it. It just makes me sad to think that maybe another mother has had her concerns brushed aside and turned into something bigger. It was at 2 weeks of age. Will felt really hot and really cranky. We took his temperature, and his temperature read 101 something. I don't even remember. I call his pediatrician. She's like, you need to go to the ER now. Okay. Find out he's got MRSA in his chest. He had this big lump on his chest.
Buddy.
And from there, it just felt like nothing was going to be normal.
Yeah.
From that moment, from the moment of being hospitalized at 2 weeks old, this kid isn't going to be a stereotypical baby. I mean, every time something came along, it still shocked me, but it was like, all right, well, apparently we're getting hospitalized at 2 weeks old for MRSA.
I don't think I knew that part.
It feels like just a blip on the radar now,
Yeah.
but back then it was like the end of the world.
Oh, well, yeah.
The end of the world.
Yeah. When did they suspect that there was something going on, and how old was he?
With him being our first child, we didn't know all the standards, like when certain things would happen. We went to our pediatrician for the 4-week, 1-month check. She had him on the table, and he wasn't really focusing with his eyes. His eyes never really stood still, and he always had that nystagmus where it shake. But everything I read said that was pretty normal for infants and babies. When she brought up those concerns, we had already been through a hospital stay with Will at 2 weeks weeks of age, he had MRSA in his breast. It was crazy. We stayed in the hospital 3 nights. It was terrible. When she brought it up, I was like, do we really have to go back to the hospital? I don't want to go back. She's like, you know what? That should be changing right now. He should be starting to focus on things. But if you don't see him starting to focus on things in the next week, let me know and we'll put in a referral. She went back and forth in her mind. Should we put in the referral to ophthalmology or neurology? Ultimately landed on neurology. We went home, spent the week. I didn't see much of a difference. I ended up asking my sister. My sister had a baby a month before me. And I asked her, I said, at this age, was your son looking at the camera when you took pictures? And she said, yes. And my heart sunk. She sent me a couple of photos. It was so clear. From there, we set up the appointment with neurology. And that's when it just all kind of took off.
When you went to neurology, they still didn't think blindness or anything like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, we went to neurology. Of course, you can only have one person, only me in the room with him. And I was all alone because I really thought we were going to go and they were going to tell us nothing. Me and Will were in there. I expected us to come away with, oh, it's nothing. Just keep an eye on this and, we'll see you back in a month or 2. We were there for a total of 3 hours. The doctor had this toy that lit up, trying to get his attention, and he's just not focusing. He's just looking. And then he was real tense and real tucked in. I mean, mind you, he's 6 weeks old. I think it was the combination of the rigidity and the eyes that she started talking to me about how we wanted to do an MRI, obviously the ophthalmology consult too. It was all kind of a blur in the moment. I was like, wait a minute, you mean something's actually wrong?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't even dawn on me that something that serious would be wrong. So it was hard to absorb it all. I didn't even think to get my husband on the phone. I didn't even think to call him because I'm just like shocked. She brings in, or another doctor does an exam on Will, they come to the same conclusion. And in this time, I've got Will nursing and I'm trying to hold my phone to get John on the call. And I've got 2 doctors sitting there talking to me. And ultimately we said, what is the biggest concern right now? What is the biggest possible diagnosis? And they said cerebral palsy. MRI was stat, ophthalmology, and we started physical therapy the next week. I remember the very next day I got on the phone with every office that we needed to get the diagnostics with. And MRI told me they were scheduling 4 weeks out. And I said, I can't wait 4 weeks. And I explained to her the situation. And I must have had the blessing of a person on the phone because she was like, well, do reserve some times. And I was like, oh, please. And so she fit us in. We got in the next week for everything, physical therapy, MRI. Once he got his sedated MRI, in the MRI, they noticed something off. And so they did it with contrast. And then they found the bilateral retinal detachment. All got made into ophthalmology that it was emergent. And we saw ophthalmology the next day on emergency.
And he was about 6 weeks by this point? Yeah.
6 weeks, yep.
And did you already start the physical therapy by this point?
Yeah, we started physical therapy before
they even had a diagnosis.
MRI. And I asked the doctor, I was like, should we really be doing physical therapy when we don't know what's wrong? And they're like, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, okay. At that time, physical therapy on a 6-month-old, we were opening his hand, open your hand, and they'd be like, open it up. And then we would take his legs, because his legs would be all curled up, and we'd stretch them out.
Yeah. Look how far he's come.
The extent of it.
He's doing great though. I mean, look how far he's come.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that truly sticks out the most or that you remember the most when they gave you the diagnosis?
There's so many moments of this journey that stick out to you the most. I mean, I remember sitting in the ophthalmology appointment and them telling me, first they'd start talking about fever, familial exudative vitreal retinopathy. Okay, what does that mean? Well, you'll have vision impairment. Okay, well, what does that mean? As you come to learn, blindness is a huge scale.
Yep.
And so they're talking to me, start using terms 20 over 200. And then my husband goes, well, I know that 20 over 70 is the legal limit to drive. And I just remember being devastated. I remember thinking, my son will never drive. Then we asked the question, is he going to be going to the blind school? Is he going to be reading Braille? And they said, I don't think so. I think large print books, but it's early to tell. So we'll need to do an exam under sedation. Then we go for a second opinion, and then they tell us, actually, we think his vision is much worse. Now, we do think he'll be reading Braille. And you're just, that hits you again. And we're going into surgery tomorrow. That's how serious. They go in there and they do the first exam under sedation, and they're like, by the way, it's so much worse than we originally thought. And you're just like, can it get worse? Genetics take ever to come
Yes.
back. We'd already had 3 exams under sedations, 2 surgeries. We'd already been through half of this journey. I get the call for the genetics, and I was sitting in the basement with my mother-in-law and my mom, and John was at work, and he calls me, and we're in a 3-way call with the genetic counselor. She says it is a mutation in the NDP gene, which is Norrie disease. Everyone up until this point kept telling us, we really don't think it's Norrie, we think it's fever. I was convinced it's not going to be Norrie, and we'd been praying for it. We can't have all this bad luck. You have to have a break in your luck. I just was speechless. I started scribbling on a pad everything I could.
Yep.
But that can't be. The odds aren't that stacked against
Right.
us.
It's just wave after wave. Like you're trying to get up for air and then just one wave after the next.
Each wave is darker and deeper and colder than the last.
What would you say one of the most challenging parts of this diagnosis is?
Rethinking everything, the day-to-day, the lifetime, everything has had to be reshaped in our lives.
Yeah.
And that's just daunting and exhausting.
What would be the most rewarding thing that has come out of his diagnosis?
The love and support, the amount of people wanting to help, and the ways that they help that you didn't even think you needed. I mean, he's the biggest reward of to see the things that he is capable of every day, even when it's something small. It's amazing things that my infant can do sightless day to day. It's just astounding to me.
Will did have eye surgery. How many times did he have surgery? How many exams under anesthesia? Roughly, what would you say?
We've been under anesthesia 7 or 8 times. 3 of those were like exams under sedation, but all the others were surgeries.
After all of that, was it successful at all?
Nope. Every time they go in, it would be something new. It gotten way worse. I do fully believe that he had some kind of eyesight. Between 2 and 4 weeks of age, he would react to light. You'd walk under a tree where there was shade, and you'd walk out from under the tree and be like, he was reacting to light. He saw something, and then things progressed. I say all these parts were some of the lowest moments or some of the hardest moments, but that was a tough one to swallow.
Do you regret anything? Like, do you wish you just didn't do any of the surgeries, or are you glad that you did everything that you guys can, or would you change any of that?
I feel good about the fact that we did everything that we could. So I'm glad we did everything we did. I'm glad we stopped when we stopped, and I'm glad we did what we did.
What was your recovery looking like? What positions and what did you have to do to help him recover?
The first surgery we had, coming out of that, there were no specific position. 3rd time under sedation, or maybe it was the 4th. Anyway, first big surgery. We might sever the retina doing this surgery, but the retina's going to sever anyway, so we might as well try it. And after that one, he had to be face down for 3 days. He could be face down or vertical, ideally as long as possible after that. We knew at least a month. That was just hell. At that time, he was 3 months old. The worst part about it, too, was you couldn't burp him. If you pat him, it could jostle the rest. So we would just massage his back with him face down. You know, most 3 months old have bad gas to begin with. He had such bad gas. He was screaming and pain, just crying and crying. There was nothing I could do. Those days scarred. I put my baby to bed that night on his side with 4 or 5 pillows. And I'm just like,
yeah, it's so...
It's like, the risk for SIDS is lower than the risk of blindness right now. And I'm like, well, they're both really bad,
yeah.
But I know that SIDS is worse.
How do you react when you're in public and someone notices something is different about Will?
It's different every time. A lot of it just depends on my demeanor in that moment. The first time it happened, it caught me really off guard. It didn't even upset me. It was just like oh my gosh, this is going to be the story for the rest of our life. I wish I had a go-to phrase or a go-to thing that I said or did, but I just don't. I would love some guidance on that. If somebody had something, give to that. It hit me. The last time we went out to run errands, 3 people said something.
With all of that, would you rather have them stare from afar and not say anything, or would you rather have someone say something and explain the situation?
I will say I don't want people staring. I'd rather them come and ask, even if it's a bad day for me or an awkward moment. I'd rather be asked. In my blog, like, I dread the playground. I dread it. And they're like, go to the playground. I don't want to go to the playground.
Yeah.
I don't want to go because then I have a direct comparison for my child. I don't want to go to the playground. You can't make me.
Yeah. If you could give someone advice that's newly going through this diagnosis, what would you say?
Whatever you're feeling in the moment, it's completely valid. If you're feeling sad and depressed, it's completely valid. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Feeling humorous, that's valid. If you want to make a joke, a dark humor joke, that's fine. Whatever you're feeling, however you're reacting to it, it's completely valid, because this is something that no one can even begin to prepare for. Don't let anyone tell you you need to handle it differently.
Yeah, that was spot on. That's like, do you feel like a different person since your son's diagnosis? And do you, in a way, feel like a stronger version of yourself?
100% I'm a different person. I think motherhood makes you a different person, for starters. And then when you're presented with something like this, you have people all the time say, oh, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how I do it. I just do. There's nothing that can break me. I can get through anything. I might not get through it well. It might look kind of ugly. There might be a lot of tears. You can't have something like this happen to you and it not change your entire identity. I'm okay with that. I love being known as Will's mom, as Will is an amazing, strong human being.
That was so well said, Eve.
No.
Would you change Will? Would you change him?
No. I mean, if you're telling me I want everything for my son, of course I want sight for him. I want everything for my son. John and I have this game like, what would you do to give Will sight? Come up with some really gross stuff. Would you eat dog poo? Would you eat 2-week-old dog poo that Will could see? Go. The answer is always yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would do anything to give my baby sight, but I would not, in terms of his personality, who he is as a person, I wouldn't change anything about him. But let's say I just peed on the stick, I'm pregnant, and you told me right then that your child will be blind, he will have this disease, you won't know what his future will look like if you have mental delays, hearing loss, the whole gamut list. There is no way I could have not gone through with giving life to this beautiful baby boy.
Do you think Will not only feels love, but sees love?
Yes, I think he feels it and sees it much deeper, and I know I feel it and see it much deeper because of everything. At first, everyone tells you, oh, he'll see everything through and that's true. At the time, it makes you sad, and you have to go through that grieving process. I know it'll be true. I see it every day. I see what he's discovering and figuring out, and it's beautiful. I'm just blessed to be a part of that. It's hard when you see others not having the same struggles as your baby. Every day is still hard, but every day is beautiful.
Ultimately, he has taught you so much. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing a take 2 with me. I'm sorry I kept you up past your bedtime and
I'm gonna give you a hug.
Oh, hugs. I'm so glad we're equally weird.
Yeah. Life goals accomplished.
I just want to give a huge shout out to Eve for working with me and being open about sharing her story. She is so incredibly inspiring, and I'm lucky to have her as a friend. Please check out and share her site, Life of a Smush Face Mom. She spreads awareness through her well-written blog. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button, like, comment below, tell us what you want to hear, what you want to know, ask us your questions. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. I've also got a TikTok because I've heard that's the cool thing to do these days, so be on the lookout for that. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.